Previously on Another Dead Man Walking.
I didn't commit this crime. I may die because of this.
I've been talking regularly to Richard Glossip, who's on death row despite insisting he's innocent.
The man is unbelievably decent.
He came across as very genuine.
I'm Ian Woods. This time, why his supporters have cause for celebration.
It's so happy in there. We won, we got it.
And how Glossip went from relative obscurity to take centre stage in the national debate about the death penalty.
At a certain point, we don't want to pay for that person to be alive anymore.
Here's the deal. She's not going to let more than 4 people in at a time, all right?
It's January the 28th, the eve of Richard Glossip's scheduled execution. Family and friends have come to Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAllister to see him. With expectations rising that he will be granted a temporary stay, they don't know whether they're here to say hello or goodbye.
But he is so excited to see.
Glossip's daughter has flown from Maryland. The breakup of his marriage meant they'd lost touch.
Nervous, scared, and I'm excited to see my dad. So.
When was the last time you saw him?
I was 13, and so it's been about 20 years.
What do you think it's going to be like in there?
I hope he's proud to see me, like I'm going to be so proud to see him. And he's a super strong man. He's got a heart of gold, and I'm just hoping the state does the right thing.
She and Glossip's niece, Billie Jo Boydell, were wearing T-shirts with his face and the slogan, "Please help free an innocent man."
We've tried to get people involved all of this time, but nobody was interested. It was just, he's a death row inmate, he's guilty, but he's not. And now everybody's actually listening, and they're bringing it out, telling everybody that he's innocent. They're getting his story out. It feels awesome.
Yeah,
he finally gets a voice.
Rules are relaxed on the eve of an execution. They're able to meet Richard Glossip face to face rather than with bars and a glass screen to separate them. Also visiting are his friend and campaigner from New York, Kim Van Atta, and his wife Mary, another campaigner, Crystal Martinez, and Sister Helen Prejean, the nun whose story of working with death row prisoners became the movie Dead Man Walking. I waited for news outside the door of the prison's death row building.
Yes! Richard's gonna live, and oh God, it's so happy in there. Everybody's talking at one time. He's so happy.
A stay of execution had been granted. The U.S. Supreme Court would hear the case against the use of lethal injection at the end of April.
Anybody who's facing execution the next day is going to feel awesome when they get those words. So it was great to get to stay, and it was great that that issue was finally going to be before the Supreme Court.
What a day. This is a little taste of what heaven's got to be like.
It was a celebration. It was a party, wasn't it?
We can breathe again. It was a good day. An innocent man was almost 24 hours away from execution. I mean, that shows you how serious this could have been.
It was also clear to me that the guards that we were with, none of them wanted to be with Richard if this happened.
When I got the news, I opened the door and I shout, "We won! We got it!" I have never seen
I can sprint.
I have never seen someone so small, so high in the air.
I got to meet Sister Helen Prejean for the first time, and when she walked in the room, it was like, it's hard to explain, but it was like this calm came over me that I've never felt before. Then my family started coming in, so it was probably one of the best days I've ever had, that's for sure, in the last 20 years.
But now the focus moves away from Richard Glossip's personal story to the wider issue of how the state wants to kill him. Lethal injection has long been the method of choice, replacing hanging, shooting and the electric chair. It was deemed to be more humane. But as pharmaceutical companies realized their drugs were being used to end rather than prolong life, they began imposing restrictions on their use. I contacted one of them. Lundbeck is based in Denmark, and its epilepsy drug pentobarbital had been used to sedate prisoners at the start of the execution process. The company agreed to talk to me, but it is a long way to go for one interview, so I put it to one side in the hope there would be another Danish story in the next few months that would give me good reason to go. Incredibly, just a week later, I find myself in Copenhagen, reporting on 2 shooting incidents involving an Islamic militant. I made time to fit in a visit to Lundbeck's headquarters before catching my flight home, and spoke to Anders Scholl.
We have never been providing pentobarbital by purpose for prisons, so of course it was quite a shock. We are a company conducting research to save people's lives with severe brain diseases. So this was from our view, the complete opposite.
So when you found out that it was being used, what was the company's response?
From the beginning, we were against it. As I said, it's a clear mission for us to improve people's lives, and we saw that as the opposite. So what we could do from the beginning was sending letters to the prisons, and we urged them to stop the misuse of our product.
Were they cooperative? Were they not cooperative?
We never heard back from them. So
they just ignored your letter?
They ignored us. You have other situations where you have misuse of medication, for instance, people using medication for doping. And here, if that's the case, you can work with authorities to try to stop it. But in this case, it was actually the authorities that was doing the misuse.
The company restricted distribution of pentobarbital, and then the European Union banned the export of drugs which could be used in executions. Eventually, American prisons had to find alternatives or get compounding pharmacies to replicate those they could no longer get their hands on. A drug called midazolam took the place of pentobarbital, but it quickly became controversial because critics say it isn't strong enough to properly anesthetize a prisoner before the subsequent drugs which paralyze and then kill. As evidence, they cited executions in Oklahoma and Arizona, where the process took longer than it should have done. Robert Dunham runs the Death Penalty Information Center.
You've got inmates who are conscious. You've got inmates who are gasping. One of the descriptions was that the inmate was flopping around like a fish against the restraints. That's someone who's clearly experiencing high levels of pain. And we know that the lethal drug is akin to being burned from the inside out.
Here's one of Richard Glossip's attorneys, Mark Henriksen.
For better or for worse, the death penalty was carried out with lethal injection for many years without very many spectacular misfires. And as a result of the unavailability of pentobarbital, the governments have started experimenting on human people to try to kill them with other drugs. Oklahoma has chosen midazolam, which is what they used in the botched execution of Clayton Lockett earlier last year. There have been other instances throughout the country where executions were lengthy. It appeared that the condemned was suffering, gasping, and conscious, and that does not pass constitutional muster. And we should not use these human beings as lab rats for Oklahoma's attempt to find a constitutionally acceptable death penalty protocol, and that's why we're suing about that.
Now, you may be thinking, hang on a minute, you've only spoken to people who are anti-death penalty and who are supporters of Richard Glossip. Well, believe me, I've tried time and time again to speak to those on the other side of the debate. Over the past 8 months, I've spent a lot of time on the phone and inside the office of the Oklahoma governor, arguing with her press officer about why she should do an interview about this. My request was rejected. I was told to ask the state's Attorney General, Scott Pruitt. His press officer said no and suggested I try the district attorney. Guess what? He said no too. I've tried charm, I've tried reasoning with them, I've even tried to shame them into talking to me by posting comments about the refusal on Twitter, but to no avail. Sure, they've issued statements and tweets about the Glossip case, saying essentially that justice has run its course, but they won't discuss the death penalty at all. The only person who agreed to talk was State Senator Ralph Shorty.
The people of Oklahoma overwhelmingly support the death penalty. Recent and even older polls show that it's 75+% issue, where the people of Oklahoma want, if it goes through a proper process and a person is adjudicated properly, and that is the sentence that's brought down, then they want that person to no longer be a part of society. I support the lethal injection. I support hanging. I support, whatever it takes that the state deems is necessary to effect that death. And if it got to a point where we didn't have the technological advancements to have lethal injections, then I would support hanging or beheading or whatever it would take to make sure that that person, in the end, meets his justice.
And he and a colleague came up with an alternative and succeeded in getting it voted into law. Death by nitrogen gas.
It's very effective. It's cheap. Nitrogen is abundant. 78% of the world's atmosphere is nitrogen. So, our bodies are used to it. So whenever a nitrogen is applied to a human being, there's no rejection method from the nitrogen. Your body doesn't try to reject what the nitrogen is offering. But when you start reducing the oxygen levels and the nitrogen overcomes the oxygen levels, then basically what happens is your brain just stops functioning. When your brain stops functioning, the rest of your body stops functioning as well. So it's very effective, it's very cheap, it's very painless.
Can you name some of the other countries that are practitioners of the death penalty around the world?
You know, I don't think I could. You know, not without looking through a list or something like that.
If I tell you that it's Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Iran, China, are you happy for the United States to be a member of that exclusive club?
Well, I don't think that changes what the purpose behind the death penalty is. I also don't think that simply because, you know, a third world country or a dictatorial country is one that employs the death penalty is that somehow it's a mark on us. Our people have chosen that this is a way to remove somebody from society. They've also said inherently that at a certain point, we don't want to pay for that person to be alive anymore.
Richard Glossip did not actually kill anyone. Does that bother you that he could still die?
I'm not sure. I'm not aware of the case. You'll have to...
Richard Glossip was not the actual killer. He's accused of paying the actual killer. Justin Sneed, to save his own life, did a plea deal.
Yeah.
He is serving a prison sentence. The man he blames for inciting him or paying him to do the crime gets the death penalty. Does that seem like justice?
Well, it seems like they should both be put to death. I mean, it would seem to me like, you know, justice was served on one end and justice has not been served on the other.
Naturally, I was keen to fly from London to Washington for the US Supreme Court hearing on April the 29th and persuaded the boss to send me to the States for a couple of weeks to cover a colleague's leave. But, as often happens, the news agenda intervened. A couple of days before the court date, Baltimore erupted in riots following the death in custody of a young black man. So, 12 hours before the hearing was due to start, I found myself being tear-gassed as police tried to clear the streets. But the rioting subsided, and I was able to get the early morning train from Baltimore to Washington. I used to live a few blocks from the imposing Supreme Court building and walked past it most days without ever having reason to go inside. This was my first hearing.
We'll hear argument first this morning in Case 147955, Glossip v. Gross. Ms. Conrad?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court.
The Court has quaint rules like male reporters must wear a tie and staff are constantly telling you to shh. But the supreme formality of the place quickly disappears once the justices start arguing. Seasoned observers said the lethal injection debate was the most tetchy for years.
Let's be honest about what's going on here. Executions could be carried out painlessly. There are many jurisdictions. There are jurisdictions in this country, there are jurisdictions abroad that allow assisted suicide, and I assume that those are carried out with little, if any, pain. Oklahoma and other states could carry out executions painlessly. Now, this Court has held that the death penalty is constitutional. It's controversial as a constitutional matter. It certainly is controversial as a policy matter. Those who oppose the death penalty are free to try to persuade legislatures to abolish the death penalty. Some of those efforts have been successful. They're free to ask this Court to overrule the death penalty. But until that occurs, is it appropriate for the judiciary to countenance what amounts to a guerrilla war against the death penalty, which consists of efforts to make it impossible for the states to obtain drugs that could be used to carry out capital punishment with little, if any, pain?
That's Justice Samuel Alito, and you can tell where he stands on the death penalty. One of the Liberal members of the bench, Justice Elena Kagan, raised concerns about midazolam being inadequate for the job.
People say that this potassium chloride, it's like being burned alive. We've actually talked about being burned at the stake, and everybody agrees that that's cruel and unusual punishment. So suppose that we said, we're going to burn you at the stake, but before we do, we're going to use an anesthetic of completely unknown properties and unknown effects. Maybe you won't feel it. Maybe you will. We just can't tell. And you think that that would be okay?
At no point was Richard Glossip's individual case mentioned, or were there any remarks about his plea of innocence. This was not about him, even though his life was at stake. This case was about the legality of how to kill him. The arguments lasted more than an hour, and afterwards Oklahoma's Attorney General Scott Pruitt took questions from reporters outside.
The state doesn't sentence anyone to death. Its responsibility is to carry out the administration of the death penalty. Here, the state of Oklahoma, since the late 1970s, actually was the state that birthed and gave life to the lethal injection process. as the most humane way to carry out capital punishment. Pentobarbital, sodium thiopental have been used in the past. If we had access to those, we would use those drugs. We do not.
Richard called me the following day. I'm going to call him Richard from now on rather than Glossip. By now we'd spoken a number of times, so it's disingenuous to pretend that we haven't established a relationship where we call each other by our first names. He has my phone number on his approved list of people he can ring. He reverses the charges, so he calls me regularly. Occasionally, I record them for broadcast. He'd read the transcript of what was said in the Supreme Court, and he was angry.
I think it's a problem when we have justices at the Supreme Court who already go in with the opinion that they're for the death penalty. And they go in with that opinion on their mind that, they're for the death penalty and they're not going to hear anything that's going to change their mind about that. The problem with that is you're a judge in the highest court in the United States, and you're supposed to hear the facts of the case and then rule on the facts of the case. And in this instance, I don't think that was done.
So you don't think they had an open mind?
I think some of them did, but I do think there were several that didn't. They made that pretty clear when they made the statements that they made.
The Supreme Court decision wasn't expected to be made public for 2 months. Richard was in limbo until then. The verdict, or the opinion of the court as it's formally known, came on June the 29th. By a narrow 5-4 majority, the court upheld the use of lethal injection. I heard the news while I was in Tunisia reporting on the massacre of tourists in Sousse. Richard phoned me from the prison as I stood overlooking the Mediterranean beach. He refused to see it as a setback.
My fight's still the same. I'm still fighting for the fact that I'm innocent. It doesn't matter what method you use to execute somebody. You're still trying to execute an innocent man.
Stephen Breyer, one of the 4 justices who opposed lethal injection, wrote a lengthy paper saying it was time for a fresh debate on whether the death penalty was constitutional. But it made no difference to Richard Glossip. Just over a week later, Oklahoma announced a new execution date, September the 16th. Next week, we look at Richard's murder conviction and ask, with only the testimony of the killer, why did jurors find him guilty?